I think it's safe to say I wish I had more here to show you guys how much of a fan I am of Radiohead, but you'll just have to take my word for it. It's safe to say that I'm a big fan of Radiohead. I even got the spelling of my nickname Johnny from one of their members. If you've ever wanted to get into them, or you've been looking for some new music to cry and jerk off to, then here you are, a guide to Radiohead and their music from a mega fan. Today, I'm going to be putting it simply to you. Well, just as a heads up, there are timestamps below if you want to skip to a certain section or chapter ahead. If you just want to hear my thoughts on a particular thing, or if you're already a big fan of Radiohead and you know who the band is already, then feel free to skip ahead. In my last video, my Murakami guide video, I should have talked about who Murakami is, and I also should have told you guys about the plots and premises of some of his books and which of his books are my favorites. So I apologize about that, and I'll be doing that in this video. I also hope to really show you and illustrate to you how much I actually love Radiohead. Maybe it won't happen because words can only describe so much. A picture paints 1,000 words, but I would say music says 1,000,000. Getting to grips with one emotion stir up inside of me when I listen to Radiohead's music, putting them into tangible thoughts, then putting my fingers to my keyboard has been a challenge to say the least. I hope I can truly convey how I feel about their music, not just as a service to you guys, but also as a service to myself personally, to really come to grips with and to actually understand why I love them so much as a mega fan. Maybe I won't be able to, but I hope that the love and appreciation that I have for the band that's inside of me can fully come out and present itself in some way or form to you. So first off, Radiohead is a globally acclaimed English rock band that formed in 1985 in Oxfordshire, which is in the UK. The band consists of frontman, singer, rhythm guitarist, and keys player Tom York, Johnny Greenwood on lead guitar, keys, and other instruments, Ed O'Brien on guitar and backing vocals, Colin Greenwood on bass, and Philip Selway on drums, percussion, and also occasionally backing vocals. They've been renowned for their experimental approach to music and their lyrical depth, and they've constantly pushed the boundaries of contemporary rock, earning critical and commercial success, while also maintaining an aversion to traditional mainstream paths. Radiohead originally met as schoolmates at Abington School in Oxford, where they formed the band called On a Friday. They played the local Oxford pub scene for a while until 1991, when they managed to score 6 record deal with EMI Records. Upon this new deal, executives suggested they should change their name, telling them very kindly and politely that they thought the name On a Friday was a little bit shit. So they renamed themselves Radiohead after a Talking Head song of the same name. The debut single Creep, a song that you probably already know even if you don't know anything about Radiohead, was released in 1992. It initially flopped, especially in their home country, but later it became a huge hit in the US, launching the band into stardom. It still is their most famous and infamous song. Creep has a reputation of sorts of being a global anthem of teen angst and self-lamentation. Their first album, Pablo Honey, released in 1993, and it was rooted in alternative rock and grunge, but all the other songs on the album were often overshadowed by the overwhelming success of Creep. With their follow-up albums, The Bends and OK Computer, Radiohead began to earn recognition as innovators in rock music. OK Computer in particular, I wish I had it here, is considered one of the greatest albums of all time, and it's been lauded for its exploration of themes like social alienation, consumerism, transportation, and the advent of the internet. Particularly its integration into society and its ramifications that Tom could already see emerging. In the 2000s, Radiohead departed from traditional rock structures, and they delved into electronic, ambient, and avant-garde influences with albums like Kid A and Amnesiac. This shift not only alienated some fans, but also won them new admirers for their audacity and artistry. This is often hailed as the greatest left turn in music history by annoying little fucking pricks. Subsequent albums such as Hail to the Thief, In Rainbows, The King of Limbs, and The Moonshaped Pool further expanded their sonic palette with elements like orchestration, minimalism, and further experimentation with jazz. Radiohead's often praised for their integrity, eschewing conventional album rollouts and embracing digital distribution early on, as seen with the In Rainbows pay for what you want model, as well as actually live streaming.
While you are away, my heart comes undone. slowly unraveling.
They have influenced countless artists, and that has solidified their place as one of the most significant and innovative bands in modern music. Despite their success, the band remains enigmatic and introspective, and they're focused on artistic exploration over celebrity status, which is always really a rare thing to come by, especially with people of Radiohead stature and fame. And it's something that a lot of people admire, and every Radiohead fan definitely appreciates. If you want a slightly deeper dive into Radiohead's history as a band, and a walkthrough of all their albums song by song, I would highly recommend the guide by Oliver of Deep Cuts on YouTube, a channel dedicated to music for lovers of music. Even though he doesn't make videos frequently nowadays, he's got a huge amount of bingeable quality music related content. If you can, just please go check him out. Do yourself a favor. He's amazing. There's no real right way, This happened in the last video too. I can't pronounce that word for the life of me. There is no right way, there we go, to get into Radiohead. And to be honest, there is no right way to get into really any hobby or activity or artist body of work. But some ways are more right than others. I would listen to their discography album by album, front to back. Like how when you're watching a film director's body of work, it's better to watch their films entirely one by one than watching clips of them on TikTok. Here's the pipeline I would recommend. Start with The Bends, then OK Computer, In Rainbows, and after In Rainbows, ask yourself, what do I want to hear more of? Their electronic beep boop stuff, their orchestral arrangements and backing, credits to Mr. Johnny Greenwood, and a more downbeat and chill, slower pace. More of In Rainbows, but with a little more electronic music and less about the warmth of life. Maybe something more angsty, or none of this. I just want something that's much more noisy and less electronic. That's the too long didn't read, that's the spark notes, the summary. Like I said, there's no right way to get into Radiohead, and to be honest, there is no right way to get into really any hobby or activity or artist body of work. You are really free to tackle anything in life any way you want, to be honest. But as I said earlier, some ways are more right than others, and I think you'll have a much better first experience if you follow this pipeline. Whatever you do though, I'd highly recommend not starting with The King of Limbs or Amnesiac or Hail to the Thief. The King of Limbs and Amnesiac are some of the most inaccessible albums, and honestly, even most hardcore fans don't like either album that much. Hail to the Thief is not a bad album per se. It's amazing. I love it, and as you can see, I even owned it on vinyl. At one point in my journey, it used to be my favorite Radiohead album, but I don't think it's a very good overall general representation of what the band's music is like as a whole, sonically or lyrically. And I also think it's a little bit messy. Think of it as Radiohead's White Album in the sense that the track order and listing doesn't exactly flow quite well from beginning to end, but nearly all of the songs are just amazing. There's a bit of trivia behind the messy track listing and track order, which if you know, you know. I'll put a link or some links in the description in regards to that. Have a read yourself. It's quite interesting. You can start at Pablo Honey, but it's really not their greatest work. I guess the positive side to starting with Pablo Honey is that your Radiohead journey will pretty much only be upwards from there. Like, I mean, good on you for getting virtually the worst out of the way first. No, but in all seriousness, Pablo Honey is really not a bad album. I don't think it has really aged that well, though, because Radiohead were facing a lot of pressure from EMI to sound more like popular bands at the time, like the Pixies, particularly with their loud, quiet, loud formula of song structure, because they were just starting out and EMI didn't want to take any risks whatsoever. And so this isn't really Radiohead per se, or at least that's how I see this album. I think Pablo Honey is basically the equivalent of how you technically had a girlfriend when you were 10 or 11 years old, but as you grow up, you realize that that shit in the past didn't matter at all, and that wasn't a real fucking relationship. Pablo Honey is a representation of Radiohead as a young and musically immature band stifled by authority figures. There are some great songs on there like Blowout, Vegetable, Ripcord, Stop Whispering, and Creep. And yes, I do actually like Creep as a mega fan. The amount of enjoyment you get from listening to Creep as a Radiohead fan can be represented by a simple bell curve function graph as pictured here. So I got into Radiohead about 6 years ago, and that was in 2019. When I got into them, pretty much everyone had started or they were starting the Radiohead journey with Creep off of Pablo Honey. Back then, I would say that there weren't too many cases of people having a different first experience with Radiohead, because Creep had and still has so much saturation in the public eye compared to their other songs. But times have changed. The top 3 most popular songs according to Spotify back when I got into them in 2019 were Creep, High and Dry, and Karma Police. But since 2019 and the C word. TikTok has exploded in popularity and socially as a whole, and everything has changed, including the public and online perception of Radiohead. Now, because of Doomer and incel culture and ideas having gained so much more mainstream social presence since then, Radiohead's music also tagged along with that gain in presence. So maybe for some of you, your first encounter with Radiohead may have very well been no surprises. It also could have been a slowed plus reverb version of it. Or maybe it was Let Down, Weird Fishes, or All I Need. Most Radiohead fans would tell you to listen to OK Computer as a first true Radiohead experience, which I mean is fair. It's like arguably their best album, and it's definitely the most well-known. Like Norwegian Wood with Murakami, it's the best overall representation of the band's music as a whole stylistically and lyrically, but I would actually recommend The Bends if you've never listened to Radiohead beyond a song or two by them. It's a lot more accessible, it's more alt-rock than OK Computer, and not as depressing either. I think for a first-timer, it's a good way to ease you into not just their discography, but also how Radiohead weave in British sensibilities, like depression induced by shit, weather, and food. There's a sliver of that in songs like Bulletproof and of course Street Spirit, the album's finisher. All of the band's albums are propulsive in the sense that they always have a clear sense and desire to go somewhere and to do something. Very decisive in that way, and The Bends is no exception to that. As a Radiohead mega fan, I love all the songs on the album, but my favorite songs in particular are Fake Plastic Trees, Bones, Nice Dream, Bulletproof, Black Star, and Sulk. From The Bends, I would then listen to OK Computer. If you arrive into the album from The Bends rather than getting straight into it, I think you'll also be able to appreciate all aspects of the album, both sonically and lyrically, a lot more. There's nothing I can really say that hasn't been said about this album a million times over on the internet already, but I can say that this, after all my years as a fan, going back and forth between all the different Radiohead albums and never being fully decisive on what my favorite Radiohead record was, I finally went back to OK Computer 2 years ago, and I haven't changed my opinion since. I think it's truly my favorite out of all 9 that have been released as of recording and writing this video. It's just simply timeless, enthralling, even orgasmic at some points, and cinematic all throughout. There's a real sense of showmanship and grandiose that I get from the album that permeates and goes beyond the music. There's also an immense amount of quality cohesion that holds and brings all the tracks together. I love this album so much that I really don't have any tracks I would not exclude from personal recommendations. Like even Fitter Happier, the album's interlude and intermission, just fits so well on the album if you listen to it front to back. Well, I mean, maybe everything except electioneering, but I've written and recorded a separate review of OK Computer that will be coming out soon to pair along with this video, because this video was already too fucking long. So make sure you're subscribed and you've hit the bell icon so you don't miss that. I'd recommend In Rainbows after OK Computer. It's their most existential, hopeful, and warm album they've made so far. Tom sings about love, embrace, company, and sonically, the album is also warm, with rich and full production from the longtime producer and honorary 6th member, Nigel Godrich. It's also very propulsive like The Bends and OK Computer, but it's a lot more welcoming and comforting. I want to try and illustrate that analogy a bit better. Let's say that you have to hug each of the 3 albums. Not like a physical copy of them each. I'm not asking you to imagine hugging a CD of In Rainbows or The Bends or OK Computer. I mean like as a metaphor. Let's say you had to hug one each of the 3 albums and they were physical objects that you could actually hug. The Bends and OK Computer are like a bag of wet dirt and a metal lamp post respectively, but In Rainbows is like hugging a family member, someone like your brother. Not your mom, because Radiohead, even at the most outgoing and welcoming and hopeful, are still a little socially detached from everything. Like OK Computer, I don't not like a single track on this, but there are some that I like more than others. And I think it'll be easier to list the tracks that I'm less of a fan of. Nude and Videotape. Most Radiohead fans would kill me for saying that, because they're frequently touted as some of the band's most beautiful songs, but please, just hear me out. Please. I love them. Again, I have no dislike or disdain towards either of those songs at all, but I just definitely prefer the other songs on the album a lot more. I also prefer the live recording and demo versions of both songs a lot more than the studio versions. And to be honest with you, with the exception of Body Snatchers, I preferred the live performances of all the songs on In Rainbows a lot more than the original studio version. After you've finished In Rainbows, just refer back to the table from earlier in regards of what to listen next. If you don't happen to go down this pipeline though, I do hope you get a lot out of the music regardless of what route you choose. Again, How I got into Radiohead was technically through Creep. I had heard the song a numerous amount of times before on the radio, in public places like restaurants, but I never really cared to know or find out who the band was. I just knew the song and I didn't really think much of it, what it was about or anything about it. I just knew it and that was it. But my first real exposure to Radiohead, when I was actually made aware of the band itself, was No Surprises through YouTube. I got recommended the No Surprises music video on my browse page. I had never come across a band with music and visuals like this before, and needless to say, I was instantly hooked. That's how I got into Radiohead, and that's a true story. Whenever I tell people how I got into Radiohead, I always lament about how I don't have a true anecdote behind my love for the band and their music. I always think of something like, wouldn't it be cooler if a friend of my dad, who was basically like my second dad, got me into Radiohead and a week later got into a car accident and gifted me OK Computer on vinyl before passing away at the young, supple age of 45? Actually, thinking about it now, it's not really nice to wish that on someone, but you get the point. No Surprises has a lullaby-esque quality to it, something you don't really come across with alternative rock bands of Radiohead stature in this era, the late 90s. But it doesn't really feel light or cheerful. It's quite melancholic in nature and pretty downbeat in propulsion. There's a sense of acceptance that radiates from the song that I get, but it's not the sort of happy, cheerful kind that is usually a part of lullabies. It's more so a 5 stages of grief, stage 5 acceptance sort of acceptance to me. Like as if the character of the song has just accepted their own death and they're okay with that. I also get an understated sense of desperation and a cry for help from the song. They've lived their life, they've gone through immense amounts of pain, and they just want to move on to the next life to escape it. So, I've been a mega fan since 2020, which was 5 years ago. After my first encounters with their work, after what feels like another life ago, what made me stick around with their music for this long? What do I find so enduring about it? Well, first off, I'm a musician. I play guitar, bass, drums, keys, and I sing. Ooh, one-man band. Ooh, show off. No, I really genuinely enjoy it, and I can't really imagine my life without playing and performing music. As musicians, I think we're able to appreciate or constructively critique whatever music comes our ears' way, on average more than a person who doesn't play instruments. Whenever I listen to a song that I love, I always start thinking about how to arrange it, and always imagine myself performing it live with a band with that arrangement. Radiohead are dubbed as the musicians' band, the musicians. Also, the blackest white band. Yeah, that's a real article. Each of the members are so incredibly talented and also have incredible music intuition, which is the musical equivalent of having common sense and problem-solving skills. It's not like they use every second on their records to show how skilled they are for the sake of showing off and gaining street rep. No, they use their talents with their musical intuition guiding them as to when to use them at the right times to garner and stir emotion, at the right times with the right amount of energy. That being said, however, as a consumer without any musician bias, what I love about music in particular compared to other forms of media is that it's such an emotionally malleable form of media, more so than films or books. Music may be a language, but it's not a written one. Music is just so intangible, and that's the best part of it. The sonic elements of music can stir and generate so many different types of emotions of varying intensities based on where we come from, who we are, what we're going through, who we surround ourselves with, what, and who we believe in. And Radiohead fits this the strongest in my opinion out of all the bands I can recall listening to. Their music can change meaning over time, and as you get older and experience different things, you keep what memories you had associated with certain songs and simply add new ones to them. And it makes their work feel so much more personal and connected to you. Like this music has actually become a major part of your life. It's like a close friendship you've had with someone over a long time. Someone becomes your friend, and as you go through life together, the relationship becomes closer and you make memories with them while they're still being able to reminisce about the good old days. Music is a lot more subjective and abstract than something like a written work or a film, and as such, conveying and solidifying my sentiments, my opinions, and how I feel about Radiohead while making and writing this video has been intimidating and hard, I'm not gonna lie. It's been a real challenge trying to objectify and concretely convert the raw emotions I feel when I listen to and experience their music into tangible thoughts and written prose and language in a way that I can only hope most people can understand. Especially Radiohead. They're my favorite band, and they've been such a huge part of my life and who I am as a person for all my adult and most of my adolescent life. If it weren't for them, I honestly don't think I would be who I am today. My hobbies, my taste in music, obviously, films, books, TV, other forms of media, even my personality has been shaped by their music directly and indirectly. But even though they are my favorite band, as of the last 3 years, I have not listened to them as often or as much. I've actually grown out of favor with them a little bit. I've become a little apathetic and indifferent, and what's funny is that I've been much happier actually ever since. I'll talk more about this later, but I used to have a great amount of passion and energy and vitality when Radiohead came up in discussion, or if there was any chance to engage with them in any situation. Listening to their music, listening to members speak in interviews, talking about them with other people, recommending them, watching bootleg recordings of their live shows, downloading them in high-resolution audio formats for me to listen to anywhere I go. I still have the same amount of respect for them, but I'm just less passionate and less energetic about them. So even though I'm not the most passionate about them now, and maybe my thoughts on them aren't as fresh as my thoughts on Murakami, they are the only band I can cite as being pretty much the only band whom I know the discography of fully. And their music has been there for me during the toughest times of my life so far. Explaining how I feel about Murakami was honestly a lot easier for me because I have friends whom I talk to frequently about him. And unlike Radiohead, I still engage with his work today, and I haven't taken a break since getting into his books. And again, regardless of however I might feel about Radiohead now, I still have that immense amount of love, respect, and passion for them and their music. Now, is there anything that I dislike as a mega fan of Radiohead? I think, musically speaking, I don't think there's anything wrong with their music. Maybe I've just gotten so used to their music that nothing seems out of the ordinary anymore for me. Oh, actually, a very small number of their B-side songs seem like they weren't written and recorded with their beautiful musical intuition, and because of that, they're like a little bit shit. But most of their B-sides are better than most A-sides of most other bands, in my opinion. So I don't think that's a really big issue. But there is, I think, a more serious and bigger issue I do want to bring up. I think I mentioned this earlier before, but if you listen to Radiohead for extended periods of time, there is a genuine chance you might become more depressed unnecessarily. I'm sure you've heard of the expression, you are what you eat, right? Well, yeah. If you get into Radiohead, there is a chance you'll also get into related pieces of media with similar amounts of somber and downbeaten energy. You might get invested in them a lot. Then you might start to take up more hobbies that your friends don't really do. So you make new friends to do those new hobbies with. And these friends might not be as happy or as nice or as kind as your old friends because they also love Radiohead and other bands and artists like them. They're who you want to be. And you get indoctrinated into this whole aesthetic and lifestyle that you never originally intended to become a part of. I'm saying there is a genuine chance that you could get brainwashed by an aesthetic and attitude and energy that isn't the most positive or healthy if you do happen to get into Radiohead. That's my disclaimer for this video today. Remember how I said my hobbies, my taste in music, in films, books, TV, and other forms of media have only manifested so because of Radiohead? Well, that also came with that negative energy and lifestyle, and it honestly took a really long time and a lot of conscious effort for me to break free from. I got into Radiohead when I was in high school. I pretty much listened to nothing but Radiohead and similar bands of a similar somber tone and energy like Duster and Swans. Basically 4chan mucore music. I didn't do or engage in anything bad per se, and I still am not, but I became more negative in my thinking and mindset. That in turn changed my social environment and my daily routine and habits and personality. I started becoming unnecessarily apologetic towards myself and other people, and I think I also engaged in too much self-pity and angst, and I became a lot less communicative with people around me. I wasn't really happy because of all of this, and Radiohead's music really only fueled this fire that I started unnecessarily. Though I'm not saying Radiohead ruined my life and it'll ruin yours too. I'm not saying any of that. I chose to consciously make those decisions, and I'm responsible for what I got myself into at the end of the day, and so are you. I could have left all of that, and I could have made a radical change at any point during that period of my life. Radiohead and their music was not the cause of all of what I went through in high school. It was a stimulus and a catalyst for a lot of what I did, but it wasn't the engine. That's why I honestly don't listen to Radiohead that much these days for long periods. I really don't want to risk feeling down again for no good reason. And it's not like I can't listen to them for more than a couple hours a day or something like that, because I still do that sometimes. But I'm only able to do that because I was able to get away from that negative energy and mindset. And it's not like also I get reminded constantly of my high school past, because that was so long ago, and I also got over that a long time ago. It's just that when an artist's sad and depressing and bleak works monopolize what types of media you consume, it can really change you and affect you. And I want to avoid that as I continue getting older, because I actually want to live my life. I think it's pretty sad feeling sorry for yourself over nothing. It's not productive or even soul-soothing or affirming. At the end of the day, it's just a huge waste of time and energy for not just other people around you, but more importantly, for you and your future self. Time is money. That might sound harsh, and I apologize if it does, because I don't mean to sound so. But sitting around in your room or rotting in your bed, sleeping 14 hours a day, doom scrolling every second you're awake, barely eating or overeating, seeing someone do these things makes me sad, because it means you're not in a good state mentally, and eventually that will lead you not being in a good state physically either. If you're like this and there isn't anything bad about your circumstances in life, or if anything bad out of your control hasn't happened to you, chances might be that the only reason why you feel sad or down is because you're telling yourself that you're sad and down when you most likely have absolutely nothing to be that sad about, with the media you consume acting as a catalyst for this. It's self-fulfilling. I don't want to sound insensitive though. Some people are in genuinely depressing and tragic situations that are out of their control, like losing a loved one, for example. The things I mentioned earlier are definitely coping mechanisms that some people use, and of course that's completely fine. We grieve and pity and mourn at different paces, and of course, it's perfectly fine to go at your own pace, because we're all different. But there's a line to be crossed, and there comes a time for everyone, regardless of pace, to move on. That could be at a different time or stage or place for you. For everyone. That goes for everyone, including the people who only feel sad for themselves because they're telling themselves to be sad. If you have lost a loved one recently, I'm sorry for your loss. My genuine condolences. I hope you've been recovering well and you've been feeling better. There's a whole beautiful world out there for you to do stuff in, and millions of beautiful, kind people to meet and get to know. Whew, that was a little bit deep, but hey, let's say now you've listened to everything by Radiohead, or you're just looking for more. Where do you go from here? Luckily for you, there is a lot that I can suggest, but not enough time. This video is already way too damn long. I would go check out the live show recordings, particularly Bonnaroo 2006. In my opinion, that's where you'll find some of the best versions of their best songs ever. Me in particular, I'm a huge fiend for the performance of Fake Plastic Trees. The distorted guitars of Tom, John, and Eddie are so warm and rich and just saturate your ears with comfort and love and embrace and energy that just cannot ever be matched or replicated in a sterile studio environment. It's on YouTube, officially posted by Radiohead, so you can't miss it. You can also listen to their solo bodies of work. Tom has a free album-long discography, and if you like more of the introspective and electronic aspects of Radiohead's music, then Tom's solo music is for you. Johnny is an accomplished film composer and has worked extensively with Paul Thomas Anderson. He and Radiohead have a long-established working relationship. As mentioned in my Murakami guide, he also wrote the Norwegian Wood film soundtrack, and it's just phenomenal, as I said in that video. The main melody motif of that soundtrack actually ended up getting used by Tom for the song Present Tense on A Moonshaped Pool.
like a weapon, like a weapon.
Both of them have a side project together with drummer Tom Skinner in a band called The Smile. They're more raw and stripped back than Radiohead. Lush is not a word I would use to describe their music, but eerie and surreal are words I would use. They're more of a krautrock electronic outfit with the same propulsion of energy and direction that's in every Radiohead record. So if that interests you, I'd check them out. Another recommendation I can give are the OK Computer mini discs. These were the personal demo tape recordings of Tom during the OK Computer era, and there's a huge wealth of material. About 16 hours or so of material. Recordings of live performances, rehearsal sessions, demos, and other types of material. It is exhausting to say the least. These tapes were never intended for release. They were only intended for personal and private use and archiving. You can find the full story online. It's one heck of a story. If this video wasn't too long already, I would love to talk about it, but it involves a hacker / collector, a ransom, leaking, and charity. Really, not everything on those discs is great. In fact, most of it is actually quite subpar and even like genuinely shit. And not just for Radiohead standards. There's an endless amount of alternate versions of OK Computer songs that aren't very good, including an 11-minute version of Paranoid Android with an organ solo that just seems to go nowhere after the raindown part. But there are some incredible gems on there. There are 3 of them I can highly recommend, which you can find on YouTube if you don't want to listen to all 16 hours. The first one is Tomorrow Night in Paris, which is a lovely and powerful solo piano track. There's a stripped-back solo piano version of Motion Picture Soundtrack in a different key. Fun fact, Motion Picture Soundtrack was actually written around the OK Computer era. And the alternate version of Lift, which would honestly be my favorite Radiohead song if it was ever released officially by them. It's just simply phenomenal. I've linked all 3 of them down in the description. Also below in the description, I've included a link to the track list of the discs. It's a Google Doc compiled together by members of r/Radiohead on Reddit. Unfortunately, due to piracy reasons that YouTube for some reason doesn't like, I can't give you a link to the mini discs themselves as much as I would like to. They are all online for you to download for free somewhere. You just have to do a quick Google search and some light digging. The mini discs are super rewarding for anyone who loves Radiohead or OK Computer. Because of that, I would still highly recommend all 16 hours of it if you have the time. I'd also recommend getting into the members' favorite bands and artists, their influences, and heroes. This doesn't apply to just Radiohead. You can really apply this to any form of media and creator. Personally, I think it's a fantastic and great way to get recommendations because you don't have to rely on other people like your friends or algorithms to get new recommendations this way. You don't have to wait on anyone. Getting into who and what inspired Radiohead will also make you appreciate their music so much more afterwards if you go back to their music. Some bands and artists they've credited as inspirations are Portishead, Bjork, The Smiths, The Pixies, Talking Heads, R.E.M., Jeff Buckley, The Police, The Fall, Miles Davis, and Fela Kuti, to name a few. Radiohead have done a couple of covers at live shows, covers of songs by people and artists they admire and are inspired by. Down in the description, I've included a link to a compilation of that. Check out the original songs and artists if you like any of the covers. There's also a documentary that documents their touring experience during the OK Computer era, called Meeting People is Easy. It's from 1998. It is well worth a watch, I think. You get to see behind the scenes with recording and the touring process. The amount of stress and anguish they all felt during this period, particularly Tom, is conveyed so well. It's grim, bleak, and dystopian. From that, I'm sure you've gathered this, but be warned, it is really quite depressing. Viewer discretion is advised. If you really want to get more out of Radiohead, then I highly recommend this monolith of a guide to the band by Carbonated Dipping Jam. It's 9 hours of goodness, and it's probably the most extensive review and guide to everything Radiohead related on YouTube, and it's pure quality. Now, I know it's very long, I can't deny that. Like, I couldn't watch it in one sitting on my first watch. Yes, first watch. I've watched this multiple times fully. As an alternative to this, I'd recommend Deep Cuts' guide to the band, as mentioned earlier in this video. It's a bit shorter than that guide, about 45 or 50 minutes long, but it is comprehensive and it's also very well written. Oliver is great with his words and succinctly describes and manifests the sonic textures of their music and his thoughts on them beautifully. If you're at that stage where you want your love and appreciation for the band reinvigorated, and that's not possible through re-listening to their discography, then either guide will do you well. If you're just getting into Radiohead though, I would highly recommend starting with the guide from Deep Cuts first. Well, that was a guide to Radiohead. I hope you liked it and found it helpful. Pretty much everything I talked about today was just from my experiences and perspective. I know this video was much longer than the last one, but what did you guys think? What's your favorite Radiohead song? What's your favorite memory of a Radiohead song? If you have any Radiohead related recommendations that I forgot to mention, please comment down below. I'm a mega fan, as I've mentioned so many times already. There's a chance that I've ever listened to it or heard of it already, but it would be great for other people. Who knows, maybe you might recommend something I've never heard of before and I would just love that. Let me know what you'd love to see a guide on next. I have a bunch of ideas for videos that aren't guides, like more specific reviews on movies and also guides that aren't about an artist or a creative, like how to get through university socially or how to be more understood by people. Let me know if you'd like to see those types of videos too. I've written and recorded a slightly more in-depth review of OK Computer that'll be coming out soon to pair along with this video, so make sure you're subscribed and you've hit the bell icon so you don't miss that. Make sure in general to like and subscribe to see future videos like this one today and the ones I mentioned just now from me. I'm Johnny, and I hope today I was putting it simply to you. Thank you so much for watching, guys.